I'm Norm Murray. Welcome to the Dr. Janine Show. For this Monday, 7 o'clock as usual on Facebook Live and also on YouTube. We've got a totally different topic of discussion coming up for you than last week. You probably already know what it is. We'll be talking about our health, our kids, pets, a beauty tip is on the way, recipes, and much more. But first of all, here's Dr. Janine to tell us about this week's topic. How are you?
Hello, Norm. So great to be here.
Great to be here also. Thank you.
That's good. I'm fantastic. And so we're talking about IBS. Now, have you heard about IBS? Do you know people that have suffered with IBS?
It's a rather explosive subject, if I remember correctly.
No pun intended. And it can be. So we're going to talk about all those symptoms. I'm going to go over to Lucy now, and Lucy's going to help to explain what's happening in IBS. So when we're talking about IBS, for most people, this is caused by some spasms that are happening in the large intestine, and it has various causes. Most cases that I've seen is related to stress and the nervous system. Also, we're going to talk about, approaching this from the microbiome perspective, and that's what's going on in the gut. That has to do with our good and bad bacteria and ecology of those organisms that are in the gut. It has a lot to do with what's going on mentally as well. So definitely that gut-brain reaction and that interaction and connection is really important when we're talking about IBS and all of its symptoms.
So we're talking about irritable bowel syndrome. And throughout this segment, we've got a lot to talk about, of course, to share with you. And along the way, I just want to remind everybody to like the video, to subscribe, click that bell so you get a notification every week of when a new show is going to happen. So you're notified of Dr. Janine's latest information, tips, and health hacks. And we do have questions, by the way, coming up for everybody. And we invite you to send in those questions. You can certainly leave the questions for next week, include your email address also, so we can include you in the newsletter, and much more. And we appreciate everybody who has been sending in those questions for this episode. If you have any questions, we want to hear them for sure. All right, so the main topic of discussion, irritable bowel syndrome. What is IBS? Like I said before, I've heard of the topic. We'll get right into the depth of it here. It's a pretty loaded topic of discussion, you might say. How would you break it down?
Well, IBS is Irritable Bowel Syndrome. So that's exactly what it stands for. So IBS has different types, and I can break them down for you if you didn't know. IBS, when constipation, so slow stools and infrequent stools, is called IBS-C for constipation. There's also IBS-D, which, if you can guess, is diarrhea, so the frequent stools, and on the other end of the spectrum. And there's also something called the spastic colon, so these are other words for the IBS, spastic colon. There could be mucus related to some colitis, and all in all, it has a lot to do with inflammation and spasming that's happening in the digestive tract, in the colon. And this can be, really cumbersome for people that suffer with IBS. And so many of you that have shared your stories with me over the years, and when I used to see my patients, this is something that's so concerning because you never know if you can safely leave your home. You don't know if you can safely eat the foods that you'd like to eat, and it can become very, very limiting and becomes then, a part of a depressive disorder because, and I've seen this time and time again, that because of what's happening with the gut and you feel that you don't have that control that you would like to, that this is, something with, when we talk about the mind-body connection, we're going to get to that in my J9 Truth in this hour, but that mind-body connection, it really can have this negative effect on your overall life. So IBS is sometimes also, which people don't realize, a diagnosis of exclusion. So often I've heard this story, you've gone to visit your doctor, even a specialist, and have had various tests done, and nobody can really pinpoint what that diagnosis is. Yes, there may be some inflammation. Yes, there could be, the irritation in the bowels, and it could be constipation, it could be diarrhea, and then you've got both all of a sudden going from infrequent stools to frequent stools, and this is, something that the doctors then, they're not always sure what the diagnosis is, so they may say, oh, you have IBS. And that's why I call it a diagnosis of exclusion for so many practitioners.
Well, what are some of the symptoms? I mean, for me, it just hurts to say IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. Honestly, I can feel the pain. Is there pain, or what are some of the symptoms?
Well, there can be pain, but it need not always be a painful condition. So the most common symptoms would be constipation, if you're of that type of IBS, certainly frequent stools as well. And what I find is a lot of people have both. So they go from the constipation to the diarrhea, and that oscillates back and forth. So it's really hard to know what to eat, how to eat, when to eat. And that's some of the things that we're going to give you some tips on today in this hour. There could be a lot of gas and bloating and that uncomfortable feeling after eating. And usually people who suffer with IBS, when they break it down, they do start to have those pains and they're not sure what to eat. And this is, what can be so difficult. And we shouldn't have pain in the gut. As soon as there's pain in the gut, we know that there is something that is out of balance, and it's not something that we should be suffering through. So that's an indication that, something is out of balance and that we need to work on some of the solutions that I'll share with you today in this episode, which is fantastic.
So we do have some questions that people have been sending in ahead of time, and we really, really appreciate that. Q&A stands for questions with natural answers. Makes sense, right? From a naturopathic doctor. Questions with natural answers. So Irene was kind enough to leave us a message asking, and this is a great question, are
Yes.
women more likely to have IBS than men? And if that's the case, why is that?
Well, they're more than twice as likely as women to develop IBS. And one of the things that I would say is, yes, we all have stress, but I think because stress is such a big factor in IBS symptoms, that this may be, women, speaking for myself and a lot of the women out there, you can attest to this, that we have a lot of stress, and we have, a lot, especially with what's going on in the world right now. And I heard another program recently where they were really, and in the mental care field, were really worried about women, and a lot of women, were visiting their practitioners looking for solutions, because it's not just the stress of what's happening in the world, but it's the stress of the children, and now, having to go back to work, and the children aren't in school yet. I mean, stress plays a lot, and certainly I can bet that the symptoms of IBS have gone up, certainly in the last little while, because of that stress. So women, yes, are more likely. And when we get to the Dr. Janine truth in this segment, you'll understand maybe why that there's that correlation with women more so in as opposed to men as well.
Makes perfect sense, and thank you very much for that great question, and keep them coming in for next week. Once we tell you what's happening next week, still to come in this segment or in this hour, pets, kids, a nice beauty tip for you. Plus we've also got a recipe on the way and much more. But Federica also left us a nice message asking if IBS is diet related. And it seems to me almost everything, if that's fair to say,
Yes.
can be diet related. Is that the same with IBS?
Well, that's a great question. So yes, it can be related to the diet. However, I don't always buy into the fact that it is related to the diet. So as much as, people that have IBS, they become very restrictive in what they're eating, and they may have heard things about gluten and celiac and all these things, and all of a sudden, because there's this wave of everybody having to go gluten-free, that people jump on that bandwagon. This has actually been studied in psychological studies as to that effect of one person thinking one way and everybody follows suit. So I have to say that yes, diet can definitely be a factor, but when you've got the leaky gut, so when we're talking about the symptoms, but also now the tips for helping with the IBS, when you've got the leaky gut syndrome, which is something that we're going to talk about in how to fix this, then absolutely your body is now reacting to all the foods that it wouldn't have reacted to previously. And that's because the tight junctions have opened up in the gut. There's a problem now, and undigested food is getting into the bloodstream, and now the immune system has something to do with this. This is how we can get into autoimmune disorders. But it's all of this interplay of what's happening happening at the outset? And was it the stress that caused this IBS and this inflammation to happen in the first place, or was it because of some of the bad organisms that we're going to talk about in just a few moments as well? So there really is this interplay when it comes to IBS. So I know this is a very long answer to your question. Is it food related? It can be, but it need not always be related to foods. And once you heal and you repair the gut, and that's what we're going to share in this hour, once you repair that gut, then no matter what food you're eating, for the most part, it's not going to have that inflammatory and that irritation effect on your symptoms, certainly for and with your IBS.
Great question, once again. Gurpreet also left us a message asking if children can develop IBS also.
Yes, that's definitely, I think, on the rise with the stress levels in children, and children not being able to deal with their emotions effectively and their stress, and not having great outlets for their stress, and developing these GI symptoms. So what may be a tummy ache, when you're kids, you don't necessarily think, or if your child has a tummy ache, you're not going to think, oh, it must be IBS. Maybe not.
No, it'd be too much popsicles or something.
Right. So, this is something that definitely, certainly see your practitioner and have this diagnosed, but know that the tips in today's episode will help for the children as well. So, that's a great thing to know, that you can do things naturally, and certainly dealing with the stress and allowing for your children to have an outlet for their stress, a healthy outlet, is something that's definitely part of the healing of the IBS.
Okay, it's good to know. It's not the sexiest topic of discussion, is it, IBS? But you know what? It's really important. It's something we all should know about, as well as parents, as we'll be talking about children, kids along the way too, plus pets, a beauty tip, and the recipes coming up, and much more. But if IBS is something that you develop, how is it then that you can prevent developing it? How do you prevent it?
Yeah, so prevention, I always say, is better than cure. And when we're talking about IBS, so specifically symptoms in the GI tract, from a prevention standpoint, we always want to be on top of having that healthy microbiome. So in the microbiome, we have both good and bad bacteria. And the microbiome is basically the gut ecology. And maybe we'll take a look at what a healthy gut looks like with a healthy microbiome. And so you can really visualize what I'm talking about. And then we'll also then look at an unhealthy microbiome. So when we take a look, this is the healthy microbiome, and you can see that there's no inflammation. We see a good balance between the good bacteria. So often the Acidophilus and the Bifidus, these are our probiotics. These are our good healthy guys in the gut, and this is what we want. Now what happens is that when we have the unhealthy microbiome, this is one of what I believe, in my opinion, is one of the causative factors of the IBS to begin with, is developing this swamp. And the swamp microbiome is not what we want. We see a lot of unhealthy microflora here. There's parasites, there's bad bacteria, there could be viral particles that certainly we do not want. So one of the best things that we can do is aim towards having that healthy microbiome, and that's one of the tips that I'm going to share when we're talking about the tips and being able to help the IBS symptoms.
All right, but if somebody already has it, I guess that all they can really do, Dr. Janine, is practice a restrictive diet. Is that fair?
I would say no. So I'm going to go through all the tips now as to how to really help to repair that leaky gut. So first and foremost, like I explained with the microbiome, we want to ensure that we have that healthy gut flora. So one of the things to include in the diet are probiotics, and probiotics are those healthy gut flora. So here we see sauerkraut. So sauerkraut, I have to admit, with my European background growing up, my mom used to always have sauerkraut, and you couldn't make me go near it. And now I love sauerkraut. And the more that I learned and lost that thing, I think, as we do it when we're younger, that, oh no, I can't touch that. That's not for me. If I look at my kids, certainly they have their attitudes towards certain foods, especially the healthy ones. And so with sauerkraut, I grew up with it, but I never liked it until I started to learn about how healthy it is for our microbiome. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to give this a try. And now I absolutely love it. So the sauerkraut really helps to feed our good gut bacteria, our probiotics, and it has has live organisms in itself. So it's something that you can make yourself. I'll be sure to share that recipe in a future episode on how to make your own sauerkraut at home, which is fantastic.
That sounds great. I can't wait for that.
It is, and it's super easy. So
Yeah.
you wouldn't think that it could be that easy. So we'll be sure to share that. Another tip is meditation. So meditation, deep breathing, relaxation are really helpful as well for IBS because we know that stress is such a big factor in developing IBS, and the nervous system becomes what I call hot-wired and oversensitive to stressors in our environment. And that's why whenever we can relax our nervous system, going into the parasympathetic part of our nervous system is really important. So taking those deep breaths, doing those deep breathing exercises, meditation goes a long way when we're talking about treating IBS symptoms. The other thing that we need is fiber. So fiber in the diet, most of us, especially living in North America, we don't have enough fiber in the diet. So psyllium is a great source of both soluble and insoluble fiber. And what this does is it helps to trap different toxins in our digestive tract, helps to move them out through the digestive tract, which is great, helps to bulk up our stools. So if you tend to have more of the loose stools, helps to bulk things up. But also if you're constipated and you have the IBS-C, this really helps with getting things moving very gently. So, it's a great way to take it in a supplement form because then, especially I like the vegetarian capsules of psyllium because this is a great way to take it in, and you always take it with a lot of water. And a little trick is to use psyllium about a half an hour before a meal time. And what that does is it helps to expand in your stomach and it helps to make you feel full. So if you're trying to lose weight, this is a fantastic way to not only get your soluble and insoluble fiber from the psyllium seed husks, but now you're also helping to make yourself feel full, so you end up eating a little bit less. So going back to the microbiome, my next tip would be to use some very specific and targeted herbs to help to kill off some of those bad organisms. So there's oregano. Oregano is one of those things that you can use which really helps to kill off bad bugs, so the bad parasites and some of those bad organisms that can be living in the digestive tract but also in the blood as well as black walnut. So the black walnut is also anti-parasitic and helps to kill some of those bad organisms and those parasites as well as their eggs. And that's important when we're trying to kill off these bad organisms because so many times, parasitic issues, which often goes, very underdiagnosed, those parasitic issues and their relationship to those symptoms of the gas and the bloating and, all of those digestive symptoms, which our IBS symptoms, for the most part, can be, and the parasites could be one of those causative factors. So important to be able to use the herbal medicines to help to kill off some of those bad bugs. Now, another interesting thing is heat shock protein. So actually going in a sauna. And what sauna use does is it helps to activate heat shock proteins, and heat shock proteins are a good thing, and they're actually very specific for helping with the fat burning process, and they help with decreasing that inflammation in the gut. And studies have been done now, and this is from a journal, Pathogens, in which the heat shock proteins have been known to have an effect on the gut microbiome, so the actual organisms in the gut, which is so interesting, and helping with maintaining that integrity in the mucosal barrier. So this is important when we're talking about leaky gut syndrome, that those heat shock proteins are able to do that. So I love saunas. I use our sauna very regularly. And so whether you use a traditional Swedish sauna or you are going into the infrared sauna, which is what I love, that you are raising your body core temperature, and that core temperature helps to stimulate these heat shock proteins, which can be very anti-inflammatory, not only for the gut, but for the entire body, which is so healing.
That's quite amazing because saunas have been around for a long time.
They have.
So somebody knew in the beginning. Somebody had.
Yes.
They had some knowledge that this was good for you.
Exactly, and that's what I love to share. So I love to share what people have done for centuries and centuries as a healing modality, and now mainstream medicine and the research is looking at and they can quantify those healthy results when we're talking about, the heat shock proteins and that relationship with the inflammation. So really fascinating information out there, and the fact that it's related to the IBS is fantastic. So on the other side of that is the cold exposure. So cold exposure, and I love both. So I love the sauna and the heat shock proteins and getting really, really hot and sweating out the toxins, but also the cold exposure is really important for relaxing our nervous system as well. And a lot of research is going into this cold exposure and actually the hydrotherapy, the going in between the hot and the cold, and the beneficial effects of that cold exposure and relaxing the nervous system, helping to relax that inflammation in the body is remarkable. So whether you are using cold showers, it could be, that you're dunking yourself in a cold lake, or you're doing cold dunks in, you create your own tub that has the ice cubes, and I've done this. So if you see in the intro video, you see me relaxing in what looks like a hot tub. That's actually me in
Really?
a 12 degrees Celsius water, very cold. And I was doing my whole Wim Hof breathing technique to get me to be able to be relaxed in that cold environment.
But you know what? I see athletes doing this.
Yes.
After a game, it's typical actually. You see the pictures in the paper all the time. The athletes lying there in a tub of ice water.
Exactly. And this is, not only great for the muscles, but also in helping with that muscle recovery, but also relaxing the nervous system. And I'm telling you, it was challenging for me. And it was one of the first times that I was in, that cold exposure for an extended period of time at that temperature. But I have to tell you, I felt so fantastic and continue to feel fantastic when I do this, because you just feel so great. So it's really helpful for overall, that mind-body connection, but also for relaxing any inflammation that you may have in the body, and especially for the gut, that's really important.
So those people that run out in the wintertime and they take off all their clothes and they run into the lake, the polar dip people, and then they come back out. It's actually a good thing. They're not insane, these people?
Yeah, they're not insane. It's actually really, really good for you. Now, certainly you don't just, and it's not for everyone, and there's a little bit of training if you're going to do this properly and in a safe way. You're going to do a bit of training with your breathing and such to be able to do this safely and have those safety people around and nearby when you're doing this if you've not done this before. But absolutely. But cold showers is a great way to ease your way into this exposure. And I like to say at the beginning, start with about 15 seconds. So, if you're coming from a hot environment, you can go into that cold. So put it as cold as what you can for just 15 seconds. And it feels like it's very difficult. You're going to die. You're not going to die. Those 15 seconds. And then the next time you try, and you may want to stay at the 15 seconds for your first few showers, but then prolong it to 30 seconds. And then once you can handle the 30 seconds, and it's remarkable how you will soon be craving that cold exposure and that cold shower after you do this a few times.
Isn't that amazing? I'm actually starting to get an interest in trying this out myself, and maybe you're feeling the same way. Getting back to IBS for a second, Irritable Bowel Syndrome, which is really what we're talking about really, through the whole hour. We'll talk about kids and pets, give you a beauty tip and a recipe and more coming up in a moment. I do have another question to go along with other questions from people watching, and that is, what is the right number of bowel movements to have as a healthy adult in a day?
Yes, so this answer is for the women. Typically, I'll say 2 bowel movements a day. So 1 for every good sized meal. And as women, we tend to eat a little bit less as compared to men. Men should have 3 good sized bowel movements per day.
I'll be right back. Sorry, yeah.
So 1 for each good sized meal of the day. So that's what you're aiming towards. And remarkably, and I know, a lot of you are chiming in right now because this is something that you haven't heard before, or you're not up to par with the amount of bowel movements that you're having every day. And this is something that you definitely want to be working towards. So for women 2, and for the guys 3 per day.
All right, there you go. Let's get to some of the questions you've been leaving, though, for us. We're here every Monday at 7 p.m., remember, for the Dr. Janine Show. Here is a question from Muhammad. So Muhammad asks, and by the way, thank you very much for your question. He said, I've asked my doctor about parasites, and he said that it's not likely the problem, but should I still be concerned about them, Dr. Janine?
Well, that's a great question, and thank you for that question. So when we're talking about parasites, unfortunately, they're very much underdiagnosed, and a lot of practitioners don't believe or sort of buy into the fact that there can be a relationship between, let's say, parasites, intestinal parasites, worms, it could be candida, but I always found in my clinical practice that parasites had a lot to do with what was going on in the gut, and this is something remarkable, and I have firsthand experience with, my hygienist. So one day when she's cleaning my teeth, she was saying, I have a story for you, Dr. Janine. And, okay,
and you
tell me
have
your
to
story.
sit there and listen because she's got her hands in your mouth. Anyway,
exactly, and there's nothing I can do about
right.
it. So tell me. And she said, well, I was having, IBS types of symptoms, and I went to my doctor, and my doctor was more in depth. So it was a functional practitioner, it's someone who practices functional medicine, and typically a functional practitioner will do more in-depth testing when we're talking about IBS types of symptoms and parasites. So she lives in Ontario here in Canada, and so she had, I hate to be graphic, but we're talking about it, so we're gonna go there. So she had her stool sample, and that's typically how parasites are diagnosed. She had her stool sample taken, and the doctor said, I want you to split your stool sample because we're gonna send it to 2 different places. So one of that part of your stool sample is going to go to our lab, our provincial lab. The other one I'm going to send to a more specialized lab, and it's very expensive to have these tests done, and she shared with me, it's pretty in the hundreds of dollars. So the same stool sample was sent to the other lab. So test results came back, and sure enough, from the provincial lab, they couldn't find anything. And yet she has symptoms of IBS. And this is
Wow.
what's so common, and this is my point, that you can have a stool sample done and not all the parasites are tested for. Usually they test in a provincial test for about 30 or so parasites. Nothing was found in her case. Now the more detailed test that she had to pay a lot of money for found 4 different parasites. So her doctor treated her for those parasites, and lo and behold, her symptoms disappear. So my whole point is that so many times the parasitic infections or that disease, that imbalance in the microbiome, which we talked about a few moments ago, is underdiagnosed. And this is why people aren't getting the results, because the doctor says, no, you don't have any parasites, you're good. And then they try, and it's like always shooting at this target and missing and trying to shoot at the target again because they can't get that proper diagnosis. And that's why I say, when you're using some of the natural substances, whether it is the black walnut, whether it is the oregano, then you're not really doing yourself any harm because these are natural substances. And certainly work with your practitioner, and if you're not sure and if you've got questions, always ask and reach out. But without doing the harm, you can have those positive impacts at killing those bad bugs like Mother Nature intended, so that you're actually dealing with that IBS from maybe what was the root cause being those parasites. So that's why it's so important to know and always advocate for yourself, for your own body. If you're not feeling well and you've been told that, oh no, it can't be that, well, it could be. And especially that rings true when it is a parasitic issue.
Great question from Mohammed. Thank you. Francesca also wrote in and left a question for us asking, is exercise helpful for IBS?
Yes, so studies have actually shown that exercise can be very helpful for IBS, and that's the great thing about exercise, is that in the fact that it is anti-inflammatory, but it also helps to relax the nervous system. So whenever we have an outlet for our stress, and for a lot of people, active exercise, and it need not be, intensive HIIT training and a lot of cardio. It could just be a walk, it could be yoga, it could be Pilates, but even, if you go for a run and you are a runner, it's very helpful for IBS, and that's because it is relaxing to the nervous system, and it is an outlet for stress. So when we talk about, the developing of stomach ulcers, which is a side topic, we'll do a whole other video on stomach ulcers, but what they found is that, and there's a great book that why zebras don't get ulcers, is because when they have an outlet for stress, and this is true in the animal world, when there's an outlet for stress, the ulcers don't develop because there's that outlet for stress. So I think the same same is true with IBS. When we have a good outlet, and exercise can be a really healthy outlet for our stress, that this can be, one of the ways certainly to support your body through your IBS symptoms and actually to get at a much better result in terms of being able to be symptom free.
All right, so Dr. Janine, that covers the body component, really what we're talking about with IBS. But how does this relate to our mind and spirit at the same time?
So this is the Dr. Janine truth about this week's topic being IBS. And from the mental, emotional, and spiritual connection to IBS, what I've always found in my patients is that there's this connection with swallowing things that maybe you don't want to swallow. And so that whole nervous connection, so that mind-gut connection is there. And when you're swallowing things that are hard to digest in life in general, maybe it's from people around you, what people are saying around you, and maybe it's a work situation, maybe it's a family situation. If that's really hard for you to digest and hard for you to swallow, then you can develop these IBS symptoms. So something to keep in mind. The good news is with the Dr. Janine truth is that you can do positive affirmations. You can, say to yourself that everything in my life is as it should be, and I can tolerate and I can evolve and be happy and positive no matter what's going on in my environment.
I like that, the Dr. Janine truth. Not too hard to swallow. Okay, anyway. Moving on though, we want to talk about our furry friends, our pets. I'm an animal lover myself, and all I keep thinking about while listening to you speak is, but what if my dog or cat has IBS? Can they even get IBS? I don't know. And if they did, how would they be able to tell me? Is this a possibility?
Well, it is definitely possible in our pets, and our pets get stressed out too. So in dogs and cats, depending on, what their stressors are during the day, yes, they can't speak to us, then they can't tell us their symptoms, but if you notice in terms of their stool, so if they're not having regular bowel movements, this could be a problem. If they have, different symptoms in terms of the stool itself, so maybe it's not the right consistency of the stool, if it's very smelly, I hate to say, and also if it's mucousy. So if you see mucus forming over the stools as it's being passed out, then this would be another indication that there could be some IBS. So those are really the only symptoms that you're going to get from your pet. One of the other things, if they do have a parasitic issue, is the butt scooting. So
why do you look at me when you say butt scooting?
I don't know.
Okay,
it's the butt scooting. So if you know what the butt scooting is, it's basically when they're scooting their butt along the ground, and that's because there's an irritation
it's like
there.
Carpet shuffle there, kind of, yeah.
Yeah, and there could be some itchiness, and there's no other way for them to be able to relieve that itchy or that irritation. So the butt scootle. Did I say that right?
You've coined
Scooter?
a term.
The butt
scootle
could be a sign of the IBS in your fur friend, and this is the great thing to know is that you can have a positive impact. So some of the herbs that we talked about for the human digestion and for the IBS and for killing some of those bad bugs and the parasites are applicable to the pets as well. So whether it is the black walnut, this is one of the ones that can be used in pets and really helps at the right dosage, of course, and the oregano as well helps with those symptoms of the IBS for our pets.
Okay, I think that answers it right there. In the last couple of weeks, and if you watch us on YouTube or on Facebook, and please remember to subscribe, remember to like the video, and click that bell also so you can be reminded of future episodes. But in previous episodes, if you want to have a look, we've had a lot of fun about a topic of discussion that actually is quite serious, and that is facial exercises. We have a lot of muscles in our face, and there are ways to work them out, right? This is your beauty tip.
Yes, so with the facial exercise, we're going to do a great one today, which is our full body workout for the face. So the full face workout, people always ask, okay, what's one that's going to cover everything? So this is for all the muscles in the face.
Different kind of facial.
Yes, and it is. It's very uplifting to the facial muscles, helps to maintain your youth, and when you're plumping up and pumping up the muscles from the inside out, it helps to pump up the skin from the inside out so that you have that lifting effect on maybe some of those wrinkles that are forming, those peaks and valleys, and you'll really notice that lifting effect in the face. And I love it because it's completely natural and no negative side effects. You might get a little fatigued from doing this. Just a little warning, you might, break a little sweat, but it's a great way to tonify all the muscles in the face. So, ready, Norm?
I'm ready, and you can do them anywhere.
Yes, you can. Well, yes. Well,
Pretty
you need both hands for this one.
Oh,
So,
do you? Oh,
yeah,
okay,
so not
okay.
when driving, when I do some of the other ones that we've shared in other videos. Yeah. This one's not recommended for driving because you need both of your hands. So, all you're going to do is you're going to gently pull your why are you laughing already? We haven't even started yet. You're going to pull the skin on your face back gently, and you're going to do big smiles. I lost count. I hope everybody's at home is doing this with us. So we're not the only ones that look like, doing this.
Wow.
Isn't it fantastic?
Yeah, but you know what, though? I feel like my face is more alert. Does that make sense? Like, okay, I'm ready for the world here.
Yes, and this is fantastic because it automatically gives you all of that blood flow comes straight to your face, and you can really feel that tonifying effect of the muscles. So a few more. I love this one. So a great full face workout. We love to hear. I know we get a lot of feedback on our facial yoga exercises. Yogurt,
facial yogurt. Because that's what it looks like before you do the exercises. That's the problem. You got to tighten it up.
So yes. I can't come back from that, Nora. You're just too funny for me today. So our facial yoga exercises, tonifying, we love your feedback. So continue to put, your questions down and send in your questions before our episodes. But I know a lot of you are enjoying this right now. So we do about 15 reps of this. And again, 3 times a day, work it in with some of the other ones like the puffer fish and the chewing exercises that we have in previous episodes. So check those out on YouTube. And always, so if you're missing this show, always, like you mentioned earlier, make sure that you subscribe to our channel and click the bell so you get our notifications, so that you always get our newest uploads here to the show. We're going to have separate videos as well just for the facial exercises, so you don't want to miss out on those. So always make sure that you're subscribed and you click the bell.
You know what? The gyms may be closed. Your face is always open, right? You're ready for it. Okay. I'm also building up an appetite with all these exercises, so we want to learn about this week's recipe, and that's what we do every week here on the Dr. Janine Show, is provide a recipe, where we have time at least, for whatever we're talking about. Now, I can't imagine what you've got whipped up or in mind for irritable bowel syndrome. What are we going to be learning about here?
Well, we're going to show you one of my absolute favorite recipes, and this is a Delgano whipped topping, and it's called the Black Sand Beach, and it is so delicious. When you see this, you are gonna fall in love, but wait until you taste it. I mean, the visual effects of this drink are amazing, and have gone like wildfire on Instagram since we posted it just a couple days ago. But you will also see, and when you taste this, it is so delicious, but it's very calming to the digestive tract, and has the charcoal, which is very trapping to all those bad guys that we talked about in the microbiome in the gut. It helps to trap all of those things that we don't want in the gut. So very soothing to the digestive tract as well.
I love learning about these new and natural recipes. So watch this. Here's a recipe for Dr. Janine's version of the Delgano whipped topping called the Black Sand Beach.
So this is called our Black Sand Beach Dalgona, and this is our whipped topping. You are going to love it. So first, what we're doing is we've mixed up our protein powder with a bit of Blue Magic, and we're going to get to that in just a second, but let's do our Dalgona topping. So we have some coconut cream in our bowl, as well as our vanilla protein powder. We're going to mix that in, and some activated charcoal, which is great for the digestive tract. And now we're going to blend this up. So we've mixed our Blue Magic in with some milk. You can use almond milk, any type of milk that you like, and a bit of ice into our glass. And now we'll put our whipped topping on top. So this looks absolutely delicious, and to top it off, what we're going to do is we're going to sprinkle a little bit of our black sand. So good.
And we do have time for another quick question, and we really appreciate all the questions you're sending in while the program is going, and also in advance of the program, like for the one next week. But for this week, Samantha did write in asking, while having IBS,
Yes.
should I be using laxatives at the same time? Will that help or hinder? What would you say?
Laxatives can be very tricky, and the problem with laxatives is that they can be overstimulating. So certainly if you have IBS and you're more on the constipated side and have infrequent stools, laxatives can overpower the large intestine and can cause a little bit more of an irritability there because they're forcing things to move out more quickly. The problem as well with laxatives, whether they're natural or not, is that you can become very dependent on them. And we actually had a viewer who asked a question about laxatives a few years ago, and she said that she, unfortunately wanted to get off of the laxatives because it was something that she couldn't live without. And because she had started taking them, if she would ever stop taking her laxatives, her bowel movements completely stopped, and she would go for a week or more without having a bowel movement. And that is not a healthy situation for anybody who is listening and you're tuning in and that's your situation. It's not normal to not go a day. So just a day without a bowel movement is not normal. And like we said earlier in this program, for women, I want you to have at least 2 bowel movements a day. And for the guys, 3 bowel movements a day, 1 for each good sized meal that you have throughout the day. And of course, everybody has variations and is variable on this, but that's sort of my baseline. And so with this woman, a viewer who had this question, she asked, what is the best transition? Where do I go from here? So one of our suggestions was with the psyllium seed husk. So psyllium seed husk being that great source of fiber was something that our experts, helped her with, and then she was able to slowly come off of the laxatives that she had taken for, I think, about 15 years or so, and she was so happy about that. So it is possible. If you are and you've got questions about laxatives, make sure that you leave your questions, below, depending on how you're tuning into this. Always get in contact with us, and we'll answer your questions. And no, we're not giving medical advice, so I'm just going to say that. But if you've got questions about, some of the things that we talk about in the program, we will certainly help to guide you in the right direction.
And remember, always on Instagram, like you're pointing out, depending on the platform you're looking at, but if you're on Instagram, you'll see some of the recipes and such. Be sure to find her and follow her at Dr. Janine. That's at DoctorJanine, spelled right out, at Dr. Janine, so you don't miss a thing. So we've learned a lot this week. Right? Wouldn't you agree? Certainly. And I certainly didn't realize that IBS was preventable, or, that there are ways to work towards reversing it naturally. So what are we going to be talking about next week?
So next week, we're talking all about iron deficiency. So we'll be talking about anemia, why it's so important to take care of our iron stores and our levels, some dietary suggestions on how to deal with that low iron, why we may have low iron in the first place. Certainly women are more common to have low iron as opposed to men, and we're going to talk about that. But we're also going to talk about healthy ways that we can increase our absorption of iron, which is so important to get our energy levels up. We'll talk about the thyroid gland and why that connection with the iron is so important in terms of our overall energy and being able to shed off that extra weight as well. Now, I just want to say that I know that we promised. So in our previous episode last week, I promised that I was going to talk just a tinge on weight loss, because I know it's top of mind. It's getting hotter and hotter, at least here in Ontario. Everybody's going to be outside in bathing suits and, a lot less clothing than what we were, protecting ourselves in our homes and being safe inside and doing a lot of extra baking. I know a lot of you have shared that with me, and I've seen all of your recipes, which are fantastic, but from going from being inside all the time, now getting outside and showing a little bit more skin. We promised that in this episode today we would share a little bit on weight loss tips. So a lot of what we talked about with the IBS is applicable if you're trying to lose weight as well. So when we talk about, having that healthy microbiome, when we've got enough of the good guys, those probiotics in the gut, it's really important that we have enough of them to be able to break down our food and turn it into energy. When we have the unhealthy microbiome, so we'll take a quick look at what the unhealthy microbiome looks at like for just a second. The unhealthy microbiome, we've got a lot of those bad organisms. So whether that's the parasites, whether that's the candida, and this is what is the swamp. So what I call the swamp is an imbalance. We don't have enough of the good guys, and the good guys are our probiotics, our acidophilus, our bifidus, and there's other really healthy organisms that help us to break down our food to be able to turn it into energy. And when we have the unhealthy thing happening, and maybe it is IBS, maybe you've got the gas and the bloating, you have difficulty losing that weight because you're not digesting your food appropriately, that this can then be related to that weight gain. So again, one of those tips is to get enough of those probiotics into the diet, the sauerkraut, the kimchi, the yogurt, if you need to take a probiotic supplement, absolutely, always designed for your human gut. That's really, really important to be able to now turn on that fat burning, turn all of that energy that you're getting from your food, it should be digested and turned into that energy so you don't have to store it as fat.
And if you have any questions, we want to hear them. Leave them in the comments, and of course, Dr. Janine will try to answer them and be online as often as she can to answer some of the questions for you. I can't wait for next week though, right? I know you can't too. We hope you will see us hopefully next week. Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, the Dr. Janine Show. And remember to follow her on Instagram, as we said, at Dr. Janine, for more great tips and recipes coming your way. And get your reminders about the show every week on Mondays.
So bye everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Be sure to stay well, stay healthy, and remember to take care of your good health and do it naturally.